suggested that he work here with us and put his stuff down so he can navigate. It's a workshop, you
Luther's
know?
not gonna be here.
Yeah, right on the end there.
Okay.
That's right. He's gonna zoom in, right?
Yeah.
Here with us and put his stuff down.
They started on the bar
Navigate.
today.
It's a workshop, you
Luther's
know?
not gonna be here. Scripted.
Yeah, right on the end there.
Okay.
That's right. He's gonna zoom in, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Pat was getting very, very nervous.
Oh, really?
If they don't get started, they're gonna take back the money. It's like, no.
He's gonna zoom in, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. No, I
Pat
like
was
that
getting
there are
Very, very nervous.
some more. Oh, really? Show money out there.
If they don't get started, they're gonna take back the money.
That's
It's
all
like,
good.
no.
It's easier for us to decide.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I like that there are
Very, very nervous.
some more. Oh, really? Show money out
If
there.
they don't get started, they're gonna take back the money.
That's
It's
all
like,
good.
no.
It's easier for us to decide.
Yeah.
No, I like that there are
Very, very nervous.
some more. Oh, really? Show money out there.
If they don't get started, they're gonna take back the money.
That's
It's
all
like,
good.
no.
It's easier for us. We can use it for them.
Yeah.
No, I like that there are
Very, very nervous.
some more. Oh, really? Improving them
If they don't get started, they're gonna take back the money.
Back into use over
It's
there,
like,
right? It's easier for us. We can use it.
Yeah.
No, I like that there are
Very, very nervous.
some more. Oh, really?
If they don't get started, they're gonna take back the money.
Back into use over there, right? It's easier for us.
Yeah.
No, I like that there are
Very, very nervous.
some more. Oh, really?
Continuing to like.
They
play-
have to- it's open, I think.
No, it depends on stock.
Yeah.
No, I like that there are
Very, very nervous.
some more. Oh, really?
Continuing to like.
They
play-
have to- it's open, I think.
No, it depends on stock. No. It did this once before, Derek. Do you
Yeah.
remember what we put out?
Very nervous.
No, it depends on stock. No. It did this once before, Derek. Do you
Yeah.
remember what we put out? Bicep?
Well, Phyllis.
No, it depends on stock. It did.
Yeah.
What we put out, bicep?
Well, Phyllis.
No, it depends on stock. It did.
Yeah.
What we put out, bicep?
Well, Phyllis.
No, it depends on
Live stream.
No, it did.
There you go.
What we put out, bicep?
I can hear you.
Well, Phyllis.
No, it didn't.
Stream.
No, it did.
There you go.
It's somewhere you-
I can hear you.
Well, Phyllis.
No, it didn't.
Stream.
No, it did.
There you go.
It's some-
I can hear you.
No, it didn't.
Stream.
No, it did.
There you go.
It's some-
I can hear you. I got no sound now.
You can't hear anything, Luther?
I can hear you.
Like the noise of the.
Is it recording on YouTube?
Not yet, not yet.
Okay, well, but it can be enabled. Okay.
For whatever reason, when you open it, and YouTube's up, it's playing back the sound. through the speakers.
Yeah, real. Good.
Very nice.
You're every part
6 years.
in like.
No kidding.
Career,
That makes
right?
him-
Yeah.
Everything.
Is that the one that likes to look at himself in the windows?
Knee bangs on the.
Yeah.
So
There's
I think,
something-
I think it's just.
Yeah,
Do you have any hens around?
people can't see
So
it
the guy
on
buys
us back
houses from
there,
say
it's
there
not
will
coming
not
back.
fails If there aren't.
so that.
Okay.
Like the speakers were just.
Yeah.
Because they're having the noise that would be was playing back to the
It's on the
speakers.
secret.
But yeah,
But the people sitting here can't hear it.
that's what really needs to have is for like wild birds to be successful.
Did I not get it? No. It didn't cut you.
No, I felt it catching. Mine at work does that, so I can beat it when I sleep.
You ready?
7 o'clock. Well, welcome to the zoning code workshop on R20 and R30. Join me for the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag.
Flag, United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That would you call the roll, please?
Councilperson Chase,
Here.
Councilperson Morelli,
Here,
Councilperson Brown,
Here.
Supervisor Williver,
Here.
Councilperson Kies,
I'm here.
Loud and clear, Luther.
I can hear you guys real good. I'm gonna keep doing this because
You can hear the,
and the last time they weren't, so it's some magic.
well,
it's Derek.
he was here and I asked him to do it, but I don't know if he did it.
Oh,
I didn't,
something
I
happened.
didn't see him in.
Something happened, something's different.
We noticed it was different Thursday morning.
Well, that's true too.
Yeah.
maybe he did get to it.
Wonderful.
Well, however it happened.
One crazy stuff.
looking at me,
Go ahead, Scott.
are you set up so I can share?
I saw that you were,
I allowed it, you to share. I clicked allow.
Getting there.
this looks familiar.
Okay, is it working?
Can't see that, but
If you, it said I think if you double click, you might make it bigger, Scott.
Double click. It just goes forward. It's full size on my screen.
I got it.
So maybe there's something somebody else can do.
I mean, I can see it fine on my screen.
We're talking about now, it's not, no, it's full size. Okay, we got it. All right, this is about the Rush Residential Town Code proposal that was prepared by the Code Committee. It's just a random house in Rush on the opening slide there, near during the Christmas season. My goal here is to really expose you to everything I could think of that's you might be interested in our proposal. I'll get into a little bit more of the breakdown certainly as we get into this, but I'm not trying to hide anything from you, slip anything by you. I'm really trying to point out everything that some folks might feel are controversial, some folks might think are great, some folks might think are not so great, but hopefully after this, you'll be much better prepared and understanding of what we're proposing. Let's see. Can't get rid of that. Okay, this is just general information. I always found it interesting. I used to get the Democrat and Chronicle when it was delivered in Rush. Doesn't seem to be anymore. And you may remember that every month there was a pamphlet that came along with it about real estate in the Monroe County and other county areas. And at the end of the year, they always had a summary of sales of different towns and counties. As it turns out, these are listings of those that I have ranked. It's a mixture of counties, mostly towns, but also some counties, but don't let that bother you. On the left side, they're ranked by annual sales. So the number of homes sold in each either county or town. So in general, you're comparing town to town. So Rush shows up as dead last in the number of sales. So indeed, we are the least populated town. The number of home sales in Rush, average for the years of 2021 and 2022, was about 2% of the number sold in Greece and about 7% of Pittsford. So Greece being the most populated town, Pittsford being what turns out to be on the right-hand side, the most expensive town. Probably not surprising. So on the right is the listing ranked order in the average sales price of homes in the town. And Pittsford's up there around 412,000 several years ago. Rush, however, it might be surprising to some people, is in the upper quarter and always was when I looked at it. Sometimes it was actually up with Pittsford and Mendon, but it's in the upper quarter over those 2 years. The average sales price in Rush was about 50% more than Greece and 2/3 of what Pittsford is. And it was close to Webster and Perrington. So you can make of that what you will. Certainly nobody disagrees we're low in the number of people, the number of homes, but we're not so low in the value of properties. So this is my summary. In the beginning, this proposal is big and detailed. It's actually 39 pages of town code. It spans 3 chapters. It's not just chapter 120 zoning. It also includes subdivision of land, chapter 100, and some appendix, chapter A125. We're going to talk later in the presentation about how the approvals might be reorganized and split up into smaller parts, and we'll revisit that subject at the end of the presentation. We already know there's a number of items that we will need to change before you get into the nitty-gritty of doing any publishing and putting up to a public hearing. This proposal was submitted originally in the middle of last year and again in November of last year. Since then, a result of other discussions in other districts, we already know we're changing some things like the special permit carryover, in this case for 2-family dwellings. Parking of commercial vehicles was an item of interest that needs to be adjusted here based on what was more aligned with what we heard the town board wanted in the commercial district, or at the time of the commercial district when we talked about outside parking. And we want to make sure we get rid of section 120-60, the so-called landscaped malls section. We had intended that to be deleted along with commercial when commercial was approved because it no longer applies. Limited industrial and commercial approvals have negated the need for that very controversial and stupidly worded section. And just like chapter 125 definitions for the zoning code, there's also a 100-3 definition in the subdivision that needs more updating. And we are going to have, no doubt, some suggestions by you folks and others, which will represent revisions from what we've already submitted from this workshop and potentially future workshops. So we know these things have to all be adjusted, not to mention again that we may want to reorganize how the approvals are grouped. Just a few bits of advice to remember. The code committee typically does not invent new code. We unapologetically plagiarize and modify from other towns' codes. What we propose typically is common in many other towns, or sometimes those towns represent a range of ways to handle situations. In those cases, we do pick what we think is best for Rush. We generally try to make what now exists be conforming if that's appropriate, but at the same time, the town code often must be written for 1% of residents who would otherwise abuse what the majority finds to be common sense and reasonable. And in fact, there's no way to write code that fits every situation. So variances always will need to remain an option for unusual cases. We could group proposals into a number of groups. I am not going to do that here. I'm going to mention what those groupings are. They are in the PDF version that I gave to Annette, that grouping, but I'm just going to describe that these are the types of things that we have made as changes. There are uses we propose to explicitly allow that were not mentioned previously or were not allowed previously. There are uses that we propose to more clearly explain that are now uncertain or described in a confusing way. There are uses that we propose to better regulate because current code we feel is lacking and insufficient and probably shown to be so by what other towns do. There are uses that we propose to not allow because those are inconsistent, we feel, with the intent of residential and agricultural districts. So again, I'm not going to show how we group those topics here, but they are available in the handout that Annette has, or which could be posted, I suppose, in the website. I am going to provide some pertinent explanations on the following topics: home occupations and multiple levels of those, hosted bed and breakfasts, but not short-term rentals, two-family dwellings, some driveway considerations, private roads, flag lots, proposed disallowed new uses of gravel mining, membership clubs, recreational structures, and indoor growing operations greater than 10,000 square feet. And we'll talk about the issues there, which you're well aware of. More additional pertinent explanations talk about accessory uses. Essentially, we're redefining what those mean, more in line with what other towns do. Accessory building or structure regulations, airstrips, minimum lot sizes for lots with water wells, and of course, all would also have septic systems. Refuse and recycle containers, garage sales, land grading, cutting and filling, townwide drainage district easement, and something I may have told you once before, what we call a bold and innovative proposal for a rural residential commercial district to legitimize existing substantial businesses. So this slide is just a little preview of more ways for residents to earn a living in the proposal, or to help them earn a living, maybe not totally earn one. And I've shown what are new proposals in red. One is produce sales from residential gardens. We're showing a third level of home improvements. So the three levels are no regulation of work from home with no visitors. So that would be equivalent of somebody who stays in the house and works from home, or maybe some other sort of business that has little or no visitors. There's no regulation whatsoever of that type of operation as is done now. The other one would be minor home operations, which would be similar to what we now call accessory uses. The one we are adding in a significant way is a category called major home occupation, allowing up to 2 non-resident employees with other restrictions. So we'll get into more detail. Hosted bed and breakfast establishments, and then again, legitimizing existing substantial businesses with the RRC district. Getting right into those topics, our proposal for 120-60C, minor home occupations, using again that deleted or soon to be deleted 120-60 landscape mall section. It is similar to current accessory uses in 120 7 R20 residential districts A5. It would allow for limited commercial parking, but again, that's one of those details we have to review and come back with a specific proposal. It would add the requirement of a permit from the building inspector and a certificate of compliance from the fire marshal so that any risks are known for emergency responders and allows for inspections in the future if needed. The major added new category is major home occupations. This, as it turns out, is very similar to what other nearby towns do, like Mendon, Canandaigua, Webster, and Spencerport. It does allow 2 non-resident employees up to 6 vehicles for so-called commercial parking, although part of those would be cars or pickup trucks from employees, potentially if needed with landscaping, so it appears residential. There would be restrictions, only 1 major home occupation per residence. It would, we would intend this major home occupation to remain subordinate to the principal use, including appearance. The proposal is, and this is true already to some extent for what's becoming minor home occupations, but now as auxiliary uses. 25% or 500 square feet of the dwelling unit and 35% or 800 square feet of an accessory building with a maximum 1,000 square feet. Now, at present, no home occupation is allowed to use an accessory building according to the current code. So that's also a pretty substantial change. Minimum 3 acres and the nature of the lot and location to be considered. This is a tough one because what's more common in other towns is they will have a district that is a large lot district, like requiring a minimum of 2 acres or 3 acres. And it is typically on those types of districts where major home occupations are allowed. We don't have such a district. We have the RR5, but none of our town is zoned that way. So the proposal is a minimum 3 acres. I think it's pretty obvious you have to have some minimum size because you can't have these 6 cars parking on an R20 lot, for example. This would require a special permit from the planning board as we wrote it up and a certificate of compliance from the fire marshal. Again, so any risks are known to emergency responders and allows for inspections. Now, this is my statement, not coming from the code committee, but the town board could consider giving the zoning board of appeals responsibility for these special permits just to help balance the workload. You would expect there would be a slug of these coming through if this is approved. Settled down, maybe not so many, but there's nothing saying that the planning board has to.
Except that the zoning board is for appeals. And so we can't really give them the ability to make,
You
Those-
actually can. There are other towns that
but that's not how we've
That's not the
typically
way it's
done
set
it.
up
That's
now.
not the way we've
Correct.
done it, so that,
that's correct.
you know, how you can can you have one body approving something, and then if someone has to appeal it, there's a conflict of interest, I think, inherent in that.
Hmm.
And that's my
Okay.
feeling about that.
Okay, I know you don't, towns don't even have to have a planning board. That role can be given to the town board or the zoning board. So
Right, but
you're
we're a
right. I don't know
small
how-
town and
how-
we're very fortunate to
I
have
don't- I
people
don't-
volunteering for
I
the
don't know
most part
how-
to do that.
You make a valid point.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, that's all for home occupations. Getting into bread and breakfast establishments. These do exist in Rush. Rush has had 2 or more non-conforming short-term rentals advertised in Airbnb. As we have written our proposal, I believe that these probably could be permitted with the proposed bed and breakfast code. 2 examples are shown there on the left. Appears to be a basement room that's actually on Pinnacle Road. I say accessible basement room because it looks like in the back of that picture is an outside door. Obviously, I've never been there. I don't even know the address. Airbnb doesn't give you addresses unless you sign up to rent. But it looks like an accessible basement room. The one on the right is very interesting. It literally is a grain bin off 251 somewhere of west of West Henrietta Road. It literally is a grain bin. And they may have a composting toilet that goes with it, not sure. But it's advertised as glamping, glamour camping in Airbnb. And, you know, frankly, the people have reviewed it, have been favorable. And there's others. Okay, here's one that was not in Airbnb, but in something called Air Cover. This one happens to be in the hamlet. It was advertised as being next to Creekside. It's potentially conforming because now B&Bs are allowed in multi-use hamlet, but we don't really have any code other than the definition for a B&B at this point. So there again, I would guess that this probably could be conforming with our code, but that would need to be determined. B&Bs previously were only permitted in the non-existent restricted business district, but now they're permitted in the mixed-use hamlet. The planning board has, in my history, had to deny requests for B&Bs in what appeared to me to be a good location in an R30 district for applicants who applied the right way, right? They said, can we do this? And we said, no, you can't, but they followed the rules correctly. Proposal permits B&B establishments with safeguard regulations, but not other short-term rentals, STRs. The difference is the presence of an owner host to prevent neighborhood abuses. So that really is the difference between a bed and breakfast, as we've stated it, and a short-term rental is the requirement of a host to be present. Some towns that have permitted STRs in the past without hosts have reconsidered and are now not permitting them due to complaints of neighborhoods from wild parties and that sort of things. However, if the town board wishes to permit STRs, we can easily provide an appropriate code. Otherwise, the B&B code that we proposed is in 120-61.2, mostly based on Webster, but also on Canadice. Canadice, interestingly, is a very small town, but it has a recognized New York State gold standard for short-term rental code. If you take a class in short-term rentals from the state folks, they use Canadice as the example. So as we established, or as we provided the code, B&Bs, the owner must reside in the dwelling as their primary residence and requires a legal verification. The question I would like to see legal input on is that okay? Other towns do that. But when it came to STRs, it is not allowed to restrict STR ownership to local people because that's a violation of interstate commerce, right? You can't say an out-of-town resident can't have an STR because that's interfering with interstate commerce. So if something like that applies to B&Bs, we'd want to know about it and modify the proposal accordingly. So we have required proof of ownership plus property and liability insurance. The proposal limits the B&B establishments to 3 to 6 guest rooms, depending on the house size. Obviously, the bigger the house, the more rooms should be allowed, including what's kind of unusual, but not necessarily unusual in other, is one in an accessory building. And that's how you would allow the grain bin, for example. But it does not allow tents or temporary shelters because we're not trying to allow campgrounds. That's just a good example of why we steal from other towns. We could never think of all the caveats and things to watch out for on our own. So by going from other towns that have pretty thorough codes, they've gotten the experience, they've modified the codes, and we can just steal from them. It does require a special permit from the planning board, includes parking and appearance requirements, must be 500 feet from another B&B, so these don't become concentrated. 500 feet, it's 1 or 2 lots essentially. Must be accessible for the code enforcement officer to verify safety and building code conformance. And we actually have a section for short-term rentals and says they're not permitted. Now that brings up the case of the STR examples I showed. There is a statement that we propose that says STRs are not permitted, but they would have 180 days to comply as bed and breakfast or cease operation.
Scott, what's the definition of the short-term rental? I mean, do we have a time frame that we say?
It was the same. It's 31 days.
Okay,
exactly the same. And by
Okay.
the way, the bed and breakfast establishment definition was already modified along, I think, with MUH to be that 31 days.
very good.
Okay, changing topics now, two-family dwellings. I'm giving two examples here that exist in Rush. The one on the lower left is what I would say is a typical two-family dwelling, fitting what most towns would intend. If you look at that, it looks like a one-family house, but if you pay close attention, there's two front doors. So it's kind of like two side entrance colonials built into a single center entrance building, if you will. Okay, so they're equal or at least similar sized dwellings of both first and second dwelling. It has a single family appearance. It has a single driveway. Okay, the alternate example in the upper right is actually what you can't see behind a tree, a small, mostly flat or at least very low slope roof studio apartment addition that was added onto the side of the house. There's actually a separate unapproved driveway added to there, what actually comes out on a state road, which was not legal, at least when it was installed. But anyway, that's the difference. It's got a kind of a big house with a studio apartment on the side versus two similar sized apartments. So as it turns out, Rush Code has a very comprehensive code for accessory apartments as 12061, but no code whatsoever for two-family dwellings. As I mentioned, two-family dwellings typically, most towns are intended to have two similar sized dwellings, each with minimum floor areas that are near but less than the minimum for a single-family minimum floor area. Currently in Rush, there's no rational reason why anyone would apply to build an accessory apartment. The two-family dwellings have no rules. So indeed, informed applicants have gotten two-family approvals when they should have applied for accessory apartments for essentially an elderly parent. And they're just being smart. Interestingly, I would say we've in the past had probably as many applications for accessory apartments as we have for two-family dwellings. And the only reason I can think of why that is the status symbol to be able to say, I have an accessory apartment for my in-laws, as opposed to say, I live in a side of a two-family. So I think it's a prestige thing. It gets some people to apply for a two-family or for an accessory apartment. The proposal does provide two-family dwelling requirements like other towns and with rules that are also built to be consistent with our accessory apartment code. So what some of those are is it requires a slightly larger lot size than a single family dwelling would, which would be 3/4 acre for an R20, 1 acre for R30, and that is exactly the same as for an accessory apartment. It adds minimum living area in 120-16, 750 square feet each dwelling in an R20 versus 1,000 for a single family. 750 is the size in our code for townhouse minimums. So that's kind of rational and reasonable. And 1,000 square feet in an R30 for each dwelling versus 1,200 for a single family. And again, the 1,000 was picked because it's what a single family is in R20. Common paved driveway. I'll talk a little bit more about driveways in the next topic. Appearance like a one-family dwelling as reasonably feasible. If the stairs are outside for emergency escape, they should be enclosed because you can't rely on slippery stairs in the snow in the winter. Septic systems are preferred, not required. That indeed is wording coming right out of the Monroe County Health Department. They prefer septic systems, but don't require those. Site plan and special permit would be required to build one. And here again, we need to fix the special permit carryover. That it would carry over under the new ruling. To a new owner, I mean. Moving on to driveway considerations. This is something probably not many people are aware of. The expressly stated policy in Rush in Town Code Appendix that I'll show in the next slide is that the number of entrances and exits onto and off from state, county, and town highways be controlled, which is to say minimized. Policy really is typical of most towns, promote and protect public health, safety, and welfare. So this is our code that exists in the appendix, A 125-21, construction of roads and streets, J, highway frontage. Says it shall be the policy of the town planning board to control the number of entrances and exits onto and off from state, county, and town highways. Moving on down to the other red part, the town planning board shall, from time to time, as part of the process of approving sketches, maps, plots, plats, or plans, require that the applicant grant to the town of Rush such easements as are required to provide access to contiguous properties onto a public highway via frontage or service roads, common driveway, or other such roadways as are required, so that the number of entrances and exits onto and off from state, county, and town highways are not increased. So we have embellished some of these considerations in our proposal. Generally, they're not very detailed, they're very big, but shared driveways, we mostly just better defined ownership requirements. Essentially, a shared driveway is shared, so you need to have the right easements and that sort of thing between the two owners. But one area where this can be helpful is if you have a lot that is near the a drop off of a hill or near a corner, you really want to often get the driveway as far to one side of that lot as you can. Sharing a driveway with the neighbor next door can get you another 10 or 20 feet perhaps to help with sight distances in those unusual circumstances. But if you pay attention as you're driving up East Henrietta Road north of the hamlet, on the west side, there's about 8 or 10 houses in which every set of 2 houses shares a driveway. I can only think that when that was developed, whoever was doing it or the planning board at the time was paying attention to this part of the code and actually required those driveways to be shared, when otherwise it's very unusual in the town. Here's some other weird ones. Driveway setbacks from the side lot line. At current, there is no driveway setback. We had a previous town supervisor who called me with a big complaint about a neighbor putting in a residence and a driveway that's right literally on the lot line. And she didn't think that was right. I said, well, I don't like it either, but there's nothing we can do about it because there's nothing in the town code that the driveway has to be set back from the lot line. So we are proposing just 5 feet to minimize that complaint. At least 5 feet, I think, eliminates the issue of where exactly is the lot line and what are you going to do when somebody slips off the driveway and that kind of thing. And that, again, that exists in some towns, not all towns. But here's another weird one. Driveways in the public right of way. Currently, if your driveway is close to your lot line, you can actually, once you get into the right of way of the road you're on, or at least certain roads, you can actually bend it into your neighbor's property. And that's done. It has been done. I've seen the example. And I said, no, you need a variance for that. You can't do that, or you got to get an easement from the neighbor. No, you don't. So we are adding to the town code that when you're in the right of way, you just extend the lot line, and your neighbor can't put their driveway in on your side of that lot line extension into the right of way. So I bet most people aren't aware of that or think about it. Private roads, it's not a strange use or issue, but it is strange the way it ended up in our town code. Local Law 1 of 2014 was approved to define and provide rules for private roads as A 125-6, street, road, and pavement, O, private roads. Incredibly, this law was never added to the town code and only exists in the legislation area of E-code. So you can find it. You can search for private roads in quotation marks. So you handle it as a term, not just in each individual word, but you can search for it and find it, or you can find it at town code, public documents, and so on, down to Local Law 1 of 2014. So obviously we want to get that into the town code, but while we're at it, I'm going to add some other things that in trying to use it have found we're lacking. But before I get to that, the purpose of private roads is that it is an option for 2 to 4 dwellings, no more, and no less. 2 to 4 dwellings, that's less expensive for a developer to build than a dedicated road, and the town does not have to maintain it. There's only a few dwellings and it's not a huge added tax base, so the town doesn't have to plow it or keep the pavement up or anything else. That's up to the group of residents who jointly own it through easements. So we have added missing definitions on how private roads shall be treated regarding setbacks and lot orientation, and generally provide more thorough wording for resident agreements and responsibilities who share that ownership of the private road. Again, I would say nothing unusual in almost all towns. This is a topic of flag lots. This actually would be placed in subdivision of land, but it's a substantial residential issue that I'll describe in some detail. Flag lots, in case you didn't know, are named after the flagpole and flag shape. Okay, so you see these things here look just like flags with poles, all right? This example is actually on Honeyway Falls 5 Points Road, pretty close to Works Road. This frontage lot here, if you can see my cursor, does that show up on the screen? No.
No,
Okay.
Oh, there it is. I think it's on that white line.
Yeah, no, that's a shed,
it's a
I think, or
shed.
something.
Okay.
Okay, well,
My eyes aren't actually what it looks like a cursor.
kind of well, if you look at the 2 leftmost flag lots have their flag poles coming down on either side of that frontage lot. So there's a guy who has 2, potentially, if they were all developed, would have 2 driveways on either side. Next to that, there literally are 3 driveways side by side. The second frontage lot to the left has its own driveway. Then there are the 2 flag poles that come down, each with their own driveway. So literally there's 3 driveways right next to each other there. That middle flag lot, you can see where the lot line that is horizontal goes through what appears to be a building. That lot line actually was shifted before that building was built. So that lot line now is perpendicular to the side lot lines. But that is a pole barn that belongs to the house behind it. So that pole barn is in the front yard of that flag lot house, and it looks like it belongs with the frontage lot in the front. So it's actually a barn in front of the residence. And it's perfectly legal because flag lots are not differentiated in what is the front setback. So the front setback exists somewhere in the flagpole, and you can put a barn right up on the front lot line if you want to. Well, I shouldn't say that, maybe 25 feet back from the front lot line. But just compare that idea of all these driveways to what I read about A125, 21 construction of roads and streets, that you're not supposed to have a lot of driveways. And you can compare that type of development to what was an early proposal for the Foster Brooks property. So this is on East Henrietta Road, right at the border of Henrietta. And of course, it's about 50 houses. And there's only one access road that goes out to East Henrietta Road. Everything else is on the internal street with cul-de-sacs as needed. So flag lots, there are no lots that front the main road here. Right, they're all front the new road that was a part of that tract. Flag lots are not widely used by developers of substantial residential tracts. They build designated roads with cul-de-sacs. And as I mentioned, this was Foster Brooks example. So that's just a contrast to development with flag lots. So what exactly is a flag lot? This gets into some of our not so proud history of the past. This definition actually comes from John Mancuso when he was town attorney back in 2019. He has some wording there, which I'm not going to read, but he shows the flag lot at the bottom there with the blue line representing the minimum lot width of 150 feet. And I believe that would be an R30. And notice that's not the same as the minimum front lot line or minimum front lot width, which is where it abuts the street, which is only 50 feet. So this is a flag lot. But a flag lot is a non-conforming lot that does not meet the minimum lot width at the minimum front setback. So whatever the minimum front setback is, might be 100 feet from the road. If the lot is not 150 feet wide, the minimum lot width there, it is a flag lot and it's not conforming. So let me point out that just because a lot is pie-shaped on a cul-de-sac, or even if it has a bit of a flag appearance, it does not mean it's non-conforming. It's whether it meets the lot width at the minimum setback. The minimum lot width at the street is a different number, a different thing, and it can be much, much smaller. The Zoning Board of Appeals generated a list of about 70 some lots in Rush for which the road frontage is less than the minimum lot width. Some of those are conforming for various reasons, but most of those do appear to be flag lots. So I would say Rush has more than 50 flag lots. Most existing flag lots do not have variances. I've confirmed that prior planning boards did approve subdivisions with flag lots before becoming aware those were non-conforming about 2018, 2019, when John Mancuso issued his definitions. And the definitions are just based on town code. So that's a legal interpretation of the town code. There's nobody making up any new rules. I have about an hour presentation just on flag lots. If you want to, if you want all that, I'd be happy to provide it for you.
I think it's your favorite.
But for now, just read the proposed 100-16.1, which includes some useful explanations. Be aware that most towns do limit flag lots and typically require proper tract development with a single road and no other individual driveway exits and entrances to the street. So options to prevent flag lots are public road with cul-de-sacs, a frontage road for lots that would otherwise be frontage lots with individual driveways. So what is a frontage road? It's essentially could be private or a public road that runs parallel to the public road, but further in towards the residences. So for example, Park Lane across the street is a kind of example of a frontage road, right? It only has entrances and exits on either end, and all those houses on the other side are accessed from Park Lane. Park Lane itself has only exits onto each end of the road. Or of course, then there's a private road for 2 to 4 dwellings. Now, not to say that everybody should be against all flag lots. Some people actually think it's a great way of developing property. But whether it's a good way of developing property or not, even if you say it's not, they are appropriate at times. On the left is Thunder Ridge. And I'm guessing most of those lots around the cul-de-sac are conforming because the lot width at the minimum setback is big enough. But clearly that one in the lower left would be a flag lot. And it fits nicely there. It's not out of place. It has a long driveway, but it doesn't really interfere with anybody else. On the lower right is a picture of a very upscale tract in Mendon. And in the back left corner, you see a large residence sitting right behind another residence. It is also a flag lot. I don't like houses looking down on other houses like that, but it's an example of an upscale tract that did use a flag lot. It's not the primary means of development, but it's there. So this is my attempt to show what's different between the current code and the proposed code. Current code being the list on the left and the proposed code being the list on the right. So the current code, no flag lot is allowed without an area variance by the Zoning Board of Appeals. What we're proposing and the big change on the current proposal is one flag lot per subdivision would be allowed as part of a routine planning board process if it meets other conditions. Current on the left, all flag lot numbers and features allowed with area variances, or all other flag lot numbers and features are allowed only with an area variance. And that's the same on the proposal. If you're doing more than one per subdivision, you'd still need a variance. On the left, the current code 12069B3 gives the planning board wide latitude for site plans, including quote, location and arrangement of the buildings, adequacy, type and arrangement of trees, shrubs and other landscaping constituting a buffer between this and adjoining lands and protection of adjacent properties against noise, glare, unsightliness, or other objectionable features. So on the right with the proposal, the proposed code, in addition to 12069B3, it mostly provides additional listings of similar considerations, more specifically suggested for flag lots, but none really unique to flag lots. So for example, it states that the house on the flag lot should be set back from the front of the main part of the property, just like a house on the road has to be set back from the road. Okay, so that you can't have a residence or a building for that matter, sitting right up against the neighbor in front. The things like that. It also specifies it has to be 500 feet away from another flag lot, a few things like that. But given that the planning board can approve one flag lot without a variance, I'm saying the proposed code is more flexible than the current code and mostly provides encouragement for better residential development. Another topic is gravel mining. And I will add that the definition, if you look at it, does include limestone quarrying. It refers to minerals extracted from the earth, of which stone would be one of them. So, you know, it says gravel, don't get hung up that it's anything different than including limestone quarrying as well. It's described in 120-5 definitions and chapter 51 excavations. It's now permitted with a special permit in 127B, which is R20, and therefore carries over into R30. We currently have 3 substantial and active mining operations that affect our town. I did not say are in our town, but they affect our town. Rush Gravel is fully in Rush. Heidelberg Materials is just over the border in Mendon. Previously was Hanson Aggregates, and that does provide a lot of truck traffic on Honeywell Falls number 6 road and other Rush roads. And you should be aware that along with several other state level approvals, a special permit was granted in 2019 as application 2019-02P to literally blast the quarry extended into Rush, expected to happen within about the next 25 years. Okay, so they have approval to come into Rush, just a continue extension. Doesn't mean they can provide a new road that exits into Rush. They would use the existing road coming out Mendon as it does, but they would sometime in the future extend their digging right into Rush as they run out of limestone in Mendon. The other one that affects Rush is Rochester Sand and Gravel in Avon. It's south of Rush on Works Oak Openings Road. But interestingly enough, they allow no south turn coming out of their facility. So all traffic comes north toward Rush. My guess is essentially all does actually come into Rush because the only road in between it goes east and west is North Avon Road, which is like a roller coaster. And I doubt we'll have a lot of big trucks to want to use that.
Yep.
So the proposal includes eliminating gravel mining in R20 and eliminating any new gravel mines in R30. I just state that Rush continues to contribute to the welfare of the greater Rochester and Finger Lakes area with existing mining operations, not to mention 2 active gun ranges and increasing tier 3 solar facilities. So it's not apparent to us why we'd want to continue allowing additional gravel mines. Note the code committee will soon propose that any special permit expires if the special use is not started within 1 year after approval or within 2 years if substantial construction is required at the discretion of the building inspector. My guess is that does not affect Heidelberg or formerly Hanson because they are continuous and they just haven't extended into Rush yet. So I personally wouldn't try to make any attempt to associate that rule with the fact that they haven't yet started digging into Rush. Next topic is membership clubs, officially stated as recreation facilities operated by a membership club for use by members and not for profit. They are now permitted with special permit in 127B for R20 and therefore carries over into R30. There are at least 2 approved examples in the last 10 years. One is George Conboy's Antique Car Club on Woodruff. That was approved sometime around 2015. And there's a Macon Tracks Radio Control Car Racing Club approved in 2017. Now, maybe Rochester Brooks Gun Club was allowed under this permitted use, but no one seems to know when or if that actually was occurred and actually was a special permit approved. We know it's been there a while, but it's not the first location of that business, of that membership club. It was further in towards the city at one time. So this is just a little bit more information about Macon Tracks Radio Control Race Club. It operated for 9 years as a non-permitted and non-conforming outdoor racing track. You may know that this is next to Vern Valance on Honeyway Falls, number 6 road. It applied for a special permit as a membership club in 2017 and was granted later that same year. The special permit allows 2 events per week with 35 persons and 15 parked vehicles, plus 2 events per year with 60 persons and 30 parked vehicles. So how you rationalize this with, say, 6 for a major home occupation is hard to imagine. But anyway, that's what is allowed now. I have a personal question around membership clubs, nonprofit located on a parcel that is privately owned. What the heck does that even mean? Could it use sham memberships or no membership enabling a private hobby and accessory building without a primary residence? I think the answer is yes. Could it cover routine property expenses such as mortgage, taxes, utilities, and maintenance, even though it doesn't turn a profit? But it's things the owner would have to pay anyway. What about markup on supplies and food, salaries for the lot owners? And the fact is, there's no way to know if a club's operated for profit or not. There's no auditing. The landowner always has control. It exists on their property. They can set the rules and can allow trial memberships. The landowner can always build equity and then profit when he finally sells out, especially since special permits carry over to new owners. So what does it mean to be a nonprofit membership club on a private lot? I believe this use has allowed operations that exceed residential district expectations well beyond proposed major home occupations. Most other towns' codes do not allow membership clubs, or they restrict those to commercial or other special districts. Keep in mind that a YMCA is a membership club. It could be in an R30 district. Could be in an R20 district. This proposal eliminates this membership club option for new such uses. 2 major clubs, Rochester Brooks Gun Club and Macon Tracks, would be covered under the proposed rural residential commercial district anyway. And all these clubs would be legally pre-existing if they are indeed legally pre-existing now. Another item we're proposing to not allow in the future is recreational structures such as a hunting cabin. They are now permitted with a special permit in R27B and therefore carries over in R30. I don't know of any such applications that have come through in the last 15 years. I don't know of any such examples. But I would ask these questions. If it's on an otherwise vacant lot, how is that different than a residence? What sanitary facilities would be required by the Monroe County Department of Health? Do town code minimum living area requirements apply? And if not, why not? If on a residential lot, how is this not a non-conforming second residence? I will say that other towns do not allow hunting cabins. And this proposal eliminates that use. Indoor growing operations, recognize this will take some discussion, but just a picture of a 250,000 square foot building and in that example. And the Webster Intergrow facility that was proposed would have been 8 times that big at 2 million square feet. So proposal defines a indoor growing operation as primarily without natural sunlight and proposes to restrict anything less than 10,000 square feet. We recognize a potential ag and markets conflict that probably would have to yield to those in an ag district. But we have had some discussions with ag and markets, and possibly in a non-ag district, this type of rule could hold. Huge such facilities appear industrial and are written as permitted in our approved limited industrial district code. They arguably don't fit in residential districts, potentially 25 feet from lot lines. So there's examples of disputes elsewhere, as one in Webster, as well as examples of financial failures of the companies starting to build them even prior to completing the building. And then you end up with a white elephant in a residential district. So moving on, accessory uses, and I recognize there'll probably be discussion about that. Accessory uses clarified and redefined. The current code actually confounds terminology for accessory uses as two different types. In 127A permitted uses, number 3 is accessory uses of structures and accessory structures. And what's meant by that is actually various accessory uses of the lot. And then there's a number 5, accessory uses, which is intended to refer to what we would now call minor home occupations. So we propose to define accessory uses in number 3 as something specific. Gardens, non-commercial greenhouses, stands for selling produce, detached garages, carports, storage sheds, barns, decks, patios, patio covers, gazebos, private swimming pools, pool houses, and private tennis courts as examples. So if you've got a listing, it's more clear what types of things are actually allowed. And then, as we mentioned previously, we would create a new code section for home occupations, minor and major, in place of number 5. More about accessory buildings. Got a couple of examples for you. This is an actual Rush lot, not far from here. This lot has 6 accessory buildings. Typically, I think we would call them all sheds, including 2 that are out of view in the rear. So there are 3 on the far side of that driveway and a third one sitting back at the end of the driveway next to the residence. There are 2 out of view to the rear. At least 2 of those, maybe 3, are closer to the road than the residence is. You have to ask yourself, what are sheds for? Is a person a hoarder, or is there some business going on there?
There's some business going
But
on there.
this does not look to me to be incidental and subordinate to the dwelling. And note the White House behind this view of the sheds. That White House would have the same view looking in this direction, and it'd have those neighbor sheds well in front of their residence. This is another one almost across the street from the previous one, a much bigger lot. Actually, I believe it's a flag lot. And it's an impressive property, but it does also has 6 accessory buildings. There are 3 that you can see there on the left, 2 of which are container roll-offs, and they're closer to the road than the residence. There's another one to the far right, kind of behind the tree, that's in the picture, but there's 2 more further to the right. And this one is known to be a business. So the current code requires interpretation of definitions to determine that an accessory building indeed is non-conforming unless it is accessory to a primary building. So because of the definition of accessory, you can't be accessory without a primary. So I think there's no question that is what the code states and intends, but there's nothing that says it clearly. The current code also allows unsightly storage containers like Averti pods, truck bodies, whatever else people might come up with. The current code accessory buildings might not be incidental and subordinate to the residence, because they can be in front of the primary building. And the size and number of those accessory buildings is really only limited by the maximum lot coverage right now. So until you get to the maximum, maybe 50% coverage of the lot, or whatever the maximum is, you wouldn't be restricted from building more. The proposal fixes these shortfalls so that residential parcels look and are residential. The proposed maximum number is 2, not including an attached garage. Other folks may think that number should be different, but we said 2. The maximum size proposal is copied from Webster, and I'll talk quite a bit about what this means practically. 25% of the residence size or 2% of the lot size, whichever is greater, not lesser, but greater. And I've gone so far as plotting what that means on the next slide. And I don't think you'll be able to understand the slide, but I'll describe it. You can go back and look at it closer when you want to. But my belief is the proposal seems quite reasonable. an R20 lot with a minimum lot size and a minimum dwelling size could have a 20 by 20 accessory building, not including an attached garage. An R30 lot with a minimum lot size and a minimum dwelling size could have a 20 by 30 accessory building. Any dwelling on 2 acres could have a 30 by 58 accessory building. Any dwelling on 3 acres could have 40 by 65 accessory building. In fact, any dwelling on 5.7 or more acres could have a 50 by 100 or 5,000 square foot building, which we listed as a maximum overall accessory building size in total. Webster actually has a maximum of 2,500, half of that. So I'm going to describe what this shows, a little bit about it. I recognize you can't see it from where you're sitting. On the y-axis or the vertical axis on the left is the maximum accessory building size going from 0 to 5,000 square feet, actually goes up to 6,000. Along the horizontal or x-axis is the principal building size. So that would be typically the residence size. And what you typically see is a bunch of horizontal lines indicating that typically the accessory building size is controlled by the size of the lot. The larger the lot, the bigger your building can be. However, on small lots, you get that upward sloping line at the bottom. And that's because a larger residence, a larger primary building drives up the size of the minimum allowed accessory building. There is that strange reddish line coming downward again. That's on a really small R20 lot where you have a really big house, you start to bump up against the maximum lot coverage. So generally, the lot size determines the accessory building total size, and it's actually bumped up by larger residences on smaller lots. And again, you can go back and look at that at your leisure. The comments, ag buildings are exempt because they're not accessory buildings. They're principal buildings, not accessory buildings. But we specified the current policies that do require a building permit, not a site plan, but a building permit. And that would include horse stables because horse stables are ag. Residential accessory buildings like a garage, shed, pole barn, greenhouse, using those terms, would be legally pre-existing only if they had the required building permits. Because the current fee schedule says garages, sheds, pole barns, and greenhouses have to have a building permit. And if they have that now, they're legally pre-existing. Private, another unusual one, private airstrips, airports, or heliports. We actually have 2 and maybe 3 airstrips in Rush. One may actually be commercial with overnight stay over facilities. Currently, they are not listed as a permitted use in Rush. If you remember the town code, it goes through a whole bunch of things allowed in R30 to carry over to R20 to carry over in R30 with a few more additional things. And it says anything not listed is not permitted, right? Well, they're not permitted. But they're also currently not regulated in Rush. The proposal permits private airstrips in R30 with a special permit as 120-8B5. It provides very common requirements copied from Farmington, Manchester, Canandaigua, and East Bloomfield as 120-61.4. So in other words, if you looked up the codes of those 4 towns, you would see essentially the same boilerplate requirements. Somebody came up with them and everybody else copied them. And they're very typical for those towns which allow airstrips. And as I said, since existing airstrips never were permitted use, they may not, the ones that exist now may not be legally pre-existing, and they would have to come and apply for a special permit.
Doesn't the FAA have any jurisdiction over where planes land?
I'm not aware of that. There may be in one of the bullets some statement about FAA approval. It might be there. Yeah, you would think.
Yeah, the question came up when there were
Yeah.
complaints about one of the airstrips, and it's like,
Yeah,
seems like somebody should have control. of
no
that.
kidding. Well, this would. So this would at least would allow the planning board to say, hey, what's on either end? If the plane overruns or lands too early, what's it gonna hit? Minimum lot size. This is something that's always struck me as curious and finally got into a real world example of it. But that is the idea that we have a town which has no public sewers. Half the town has no public water, yet we have these things called R20 and R30, which have 20,000 and 30,000 square foot minimum lot sizes. This is a real world example. Okay, to the right, you can see a circle, which I can't point out with the cursor. But they're in about the left center of the picture is a kind of a black dot with a bluish line that partly goes through it. That is proposed well location for this residence, and there's a 100-foot circle with a dotted line drawn around that. So you can look at that and where the septic systems are in the neighbor's property, and in fact, that well would be okay there because the neighbor's septics are not in that 100-foot circle. However, up in the front, you see a septic system just to the north in this drawing of the driveway. And a bit above that is a little picture of a circle, and it says existing well. So that neighbor put his well right there where that existing well is shown, and it's only 45 feet from the proposed septic system. So that is something the County Board of Health would not approve. And they typically don't bend those rules. So as it turns out, this guy ended up having to pay his neighbor to move his neighbor's well, which he did. And he squashed his septic system down a little bit so he could get further enough away. It was a case where he wanted, this applicant wanted a walkout basement in the back. He couldn't put his septic system in the back on this small lot of 1.2 acres and have a walkout basement. So he wanted to put it in the front, and he got into trouble with the neighbor's well. It's just showing that example to give you an example. So again, no parcels in Rush have public sewers. Most or all R20 parcels in Rush have public water, but only about half of our 30 parcels have public water, so about half do not have public water. The placement of private wells and septic on 1-acre lots has caused contamination concerns and conflict with the 100-foot distance requirement by the Department of Health. 30,000 square foot, less than 7/10 of an acre lot size minimums can't be justified in this case. So having water wells and septic systems on the same lot requires more than just the current minimum lot sizes. Some towns have complicated tables of lot size requirements based on whether a lot has public utilities available. And Wheatland is example. If in Wheatland, if you don't have town water, this way, if you do not have town water and also do not have town sewers, the minimum lot size is 2 acres. Even though they have other lots in the town, which go as far as 2,400 or 24,000 square feet. So rather than do something complicated, we just made up a rule that minimum lot sizes shall be double what's shown in the tables above. This is in 120-17 minimum area and dimensions of lots. Minimum lot sizes shall be double what's shown in the tables for any lots that do not have public water and also do not have public sewers. So in an R30, that would be a 1.3 acre minimum, still not anywhere near 2 acres. We also added that minimum lot sizes in all districts except RR5 shall be continuous area for building and yard area free of wetlands, surface water, slopes over 15%, or easements for non-owner uses of land. So again, it doesn't make a lot of sense to have a 30,000 square foot minimum in R30 if a lot of that is wetlands and surface water or slopes over 15%, or a neighbor's got an easement on it that you can't use. We added a G, lot width is defined in 120-5 definitions and word uses as measured at the minimum front setback. That was actually requested by John Limbeck, so he doesn't have to go looking through definitions to find it. And we also said H, minimum front lot line distance, is defined in 120-5, lot line front as where a lot abuts a street. But what's added is this distance shall apply to any location that provides access to the primary portion of a lot, such that the entire driveway area is no less than the minimum front lot line. So I've seen a case where the minimum front lot width was 50 feet at the road, but instead of widening to the minimum lot, it actually narrowed first as a part of a flag lot. So it went down from 50 to 45. Well, that's not the intent of the 50 minimum that's along the street. That was really written with the assumption that it gets wider than 50 feet at the street, not narrower. So that's just attempt to stop people from getting narrower than the 50 feet. Refuse and recycle containers. I suspect this will provide some controversy, but let me go through it. This is a picture of a building not far from here in the hamlet. And you see all those garbage totes, recycled totes lined up just really feet off of the sidewalk and not far from the road. Some residences keep garbage receptacles unscreened near roads full-time, such as Hamlet Apartments just off the sidewalks. And I've seen it on long driveways to a Hilltop residence. So this residence lives on the top of a hill. He's got a driveway, may or may not be paved, and he would have to drag his totes or carry his garbage cans in his trunk from his house down to the bottom of the hill by the road. So instead, they just leave the garbage receptacles at the road and fill them up as they drive by. So I'm saying for a town that proposes to retain the historic character of the hamlet and will not permit RVs and driveways, having no policy on waste receptacles seems inconsistent. The other problem that building inspectors and CEOs tend to run into is long-term commercial dumpster and roll-off use in residential areas. They're unsightly, and they would much prefer if they were controlled. So what we've proposed for residential lots, maximum 100-gallon container, which is the size of a large tote, must be covered if it's on offensive smell. Again, it comes from other towns. When not out for pickup, no stipulation of how long that is, but when not out for pickup, must be stored behind the front lot line of the primary building or screened, and also screened if less than 50 feet from the road. So again, these are rules written for the 1%. As I stated down the bottom, I would not expect a building inspector or the CEO to go running around looking for garbage containers being out. But if there is a complaint and it's viewed as being objectionable, you need a code to refer back to so that you have some law to stand behind to say you need to do better. I do state that use of a dumpster or roll-off requires a permit from the building inspector for any use. Proposed fee is none for the first 3 months and then $100 thereafter, recognizing that this is not something you want to promote long-term. Another similar one for law of the 1% is garage sales. So we've proposed it in 12060.1. And to deal with willful ongoing retail sales businesses. So again, this is if it becomes obvious and complaints and long-term, you've got a local law to subject the person with. But essentially, it adheres to New York State Tax Bulletin ST-07, which states 3 days or less per calendar year. We are proposing not any permit required if you want to have a garage sale. And there would be exceptions in the code for garden produce sales. 5 items per year advertised as those same items. So if you want to sell your lawn tractor or your lawn furniture, or you want to sell your car in your front yard, you can do that if you're advertising it as that item. It would not include household dispersal auctions or court-ordered sales. And signs, another issue. People tend to want to nail signs to telephone poles at the end of the street and then never take them down. So signs would be limited to the same property, no signs on poles, highways, or other properties. And primarily, as I said, it provides a local law for the CEO to enforce in rare circumstances. Land grading, cutting, and filling. Town code does have some grading restrictions. Chapter 51, excavations, goes into quite a bit of detail, but it says these do not apply if removing topsoil or other earth products from one portion of the premises to another part of the same premises, when such removal is necessary in an accessory use or is made for the purposes of farming or improving said property. So in other words, anybody moving anything in their property, it would be improving the property. That's what they would say. Gravel mining regulations, there are some, and that's in the definition in a gravel mining section, but it doesn't really say much about other folks. There is a 12054 dumping operations. It says they are prohibited except dumping inert fill materials to fill to establish grades. So again, another big caveat there, and anybody could claim they're filling to establish grade. Under 12062, uses prohibited, soil stripping and the sale or disposition of topsoil so stripped from within the town are prohibited. So you couldn't have a topsoil selling business here and just take the topsoil off your land. But the CEO and building inspector feel all those parts of the code are lacking since they're unable to cite a specific code when grading affects runoff onto adjacent property. And that is the issue. They've had some examples where somebody has done something near the edge of their property causing runoff, and it upsets the neighbor, and the town officials have no town code referred to and say clearly it's illegal. So many towns do require grading permits more universally, some as for as little as 3 inches of grade change. The grading restriction issue has often been discussed, at least within the planning board, and it's very controversial. So we are proposing the least possible rule we could think of that gives the CEO some ability to follow up and get remediation if somebody abuses cutting, filling, and grading and affects a neighbor in a negative way. So we are proposing to add to 12062, these uses prohibited in all districts include no grading, cutting, and filling that negatively impacts adjacent neighbors, vacant property, roadways, easements, or other property features. So again, it's another law for the 1%. And we just couldn't think of any way to say any less and still have some teeth to prevent people from doing something negative for their neighbors, or having to fix it once they have done it. Townwide drainage easements. So I'm going to describe more about this, what the issues are. The proposal is to make this official in the town code, because I believe it is official. It's just not in the code as any way that we can reference. But at the same time, state my personal dislike of it. The town has established a townwide drainage district to allow the highway department access to streams and drainage ditches so that blockages can be cleared to prevent flood damage. The only leverage the town has to gain widespread easements on private property is to withhold planning board application approvals as they come up. So what that means is somebody comes to the planning board with a site plan proposal or a subdivision proposal. We say, okay, but if we go ahead with this, you have a stream in the back corner, you need to provide the town access to get to that stream and to clean it up, if as the town sees fit. And that would be through an easement. So this does cause some difficulties. The planning board, to be honest, is unsure when it applies. I think we've recently said any classified stream, but we just made that up because we've asked the town board for clarification in the past, and previous town boards have not responded. So we just play as best we can, figure out what's significant and what isn't. The applicant may be dismayed when they're informed of that requirement because it's not obvious in the code. The applicant ends up being stuck with an easement providing access across any part of their property. The town can destroy landscaping and buildings, literally, and only has to reseed existing lawn or repair pavement that it damaged. And when you think about this, so how does the planning board enforce such an easement? We can state it's required as a condition of approval, but there's nothing other than a special effort to require that the applicant actually goes through with that. So what we've been doing lately is we say, well, we're not going to sign, the planning board chairman is not going to sign off unless the applicant provides proof that that easement is on file with the county, right? So it gets kind of ugly because there's lots of examples where it was a requirement, but in fact, the easement was never filed. Now, all of these forms required are on the planning board page of the town website. We propose to codify this requirement as 100-17 in part of stream, drainage way, and retention basins, item C. And it reads this way: the town has established a townwide drainage district which requires an easement of 20 feet from the top of banks on each side of any classified stream on lots that are part of the approval process for new subdivision and site plan applications. This grant enables the town to access and maintain streams and other drainage features and to thereby reduce or prevent future flooding and water damage. Specific requirements are described in the Town of Rush Townwide Drainage District Standard Easement Form. Subdivision and site plan maps shall show the meets and bounds of the easement. The property owner shall sign the easement form and file it with the Monroe County Clerk's Office and shall provide proof thereof as a condition of final plan sign off. So these are my personal opinions. This is not coming from the code committee. But the townwide drainage district easement, it's onerous and burdensome requirement with implementation problems that sometimes just don't seem justified. Town board, in my opinion, should consider what, if any, streams remain as a flooding threat to require such an extreme policy, and then limit the district's area to that and negotiate access to other areas only if needed. So anyway, we're going to codify, the proposal is to codify what the current policy is. Again, I just find it pretty onerous. Continuing on. This potentially could be another controversial one, or I would say at least sensitive. Rural residential commercial district proposal. So what about larger businesses like Rush Gravel and Vern Vallon Septic that are located in R30 districts? They're certainly highly valued in the community, but their scale exceeds home occupations. What about existing firearm ranges like Rochester Brooks and Monroe County ranges that are located in R30? Conformance of those seems to be unknown. Nobody seems to know how they came to be there. Maybe the county has more authority over towns and they can do it. Maybe Rochester Brooks has a special permit from long ago that nobody knows about. But certainly Making Tracks is another one that was approved as a membership club. That one's legitimate. So the code committee has an innovative proposal to make all those conforming. The goal is clearly to benefit those businesses, not to negotiate if those are currently conforming or not. But it wouldn't, if we pursued this, it would have to be managed with sensitivity, the right level of timing and communications to avoid misunderstandings. But it would encompass about 215 acres of Rush Gravel and Monroe County lands on Kavanaugh and Stony Brook. Another 283 acres on Honeywell Falls number 6 road that would include Rochester Brooks Gun Club, Vern Vallon Septic, and Making Tracks Racing Club. Now, this 215 and 283 acres are all larger than all of the current commercial, limited industrial, residential, multiple dwelling, and a mixed-use hamlet district. So you worry about spot zoning. Right, but these are pretty big. It would hard to say they're zoning a specific spot. This is what it would look like with the 2 blue RRCs I show there, right? And you can compare them to the pink and purple in this slide. Commercial, limited industrial. They're big areas. So in terms of spot zoning, the pros would be it's not a single property or owner, it's not a single use, it's not new or newly proposed use, and it's not a small area. The cons of the proposal being considered spot zoning is that it's not specifically mentioned in the comprehensive plan, which tends to mention business development near major roads. So what this proposal would be for RRC would include all uses permitted in R30, which by the way includes gravel mining and membership clubs, but might not in the future. It permits accessory uses. It would permit accessory uses for gravel mining. So sales of other bulk landscaping supplies like mulch or decorative stone and bulk trucking with dump trucks by special permit. So I think that would legitimize everything I know of that goes on at Rush Gravel. Permit essential services. So we said required by high percentage of Rush residents like water wells and septic services. And it permits firearm ranges and accessory uses like restaurants and food for members run by governments and membership clubs, including, we said 4 weekend events. We'd want to verify with Rochester Brooks that 4 is enough for them, but some limited number of weekend events. It includes large acreage requirements for any of those uses so that they couldn't pop up elsewhere in the RRC districts on smaller lots. It includes safeguards similar to commercial zones next to residential, which is logical since they're within R30. Things like larger site setbacks and special permits for outside storage. But we'd probably want to modify the off-hours vehicles, would make that acceptable with a site plan, just as we did in the other districts. So clearly this would require more discussion and deliberate planning, getting legal advice to see if creation of such localized districts would be likely to pass muster. If you got that far, you'd want to contract the affected businesses, explain what we're trying to do and get their input so that we cover what they feel they need. And given the difficulty and sensitivity of this, there probably are other higher priorities in the short term. But given that we did come up with it and we still believe it's a useful need, I would even say essential, that I didn't want to just drop it at this point. So I said this whole thing was big and detailed, and we would get back into how this might be split up differently for approval at the end of the presentation. We're now, and you'll probably thank me for saying this, near the end of the presentation. Yeah, we're not quite an hour and a half in, and not different than what I expected. So I'm going to get into that now. What parts are there and how they might be split up differently. So in describing what parts are there, we talked about previously 125 definitions and word usage. I could argue those are already taken care of. We submitted all those separately. The need originated from the desire to have a permeable paving capability and with a definition in 12057 off-street parking, or I should say for 12057 off-street parking. So as a result of driving these definition updates, we said, let's get all the definition changes we know of into this and get all of them approved at once, at least as best we know how, so that we can avoid multiple approvals. So that's 6 pages of the mentioned 39 pages. The next part, which I would call the primary part, and are mostly inseparable, are R120, I'm sorry, 120-7, R20, and 120-8, R30 districts, and sections referenced in those that as being permitted. So that would include changes to sections like 120 accessory buildings and structures, a new home occupation section, a new sale of produce section, a new 2-family dwelling section, a new bed and breakfast establishment section, a new short-term rental section, just to say they're not allowed, and a new private airstrip, airports or heliport section. So that was what I would call the primary and inseparable part of residential, and that's about 15 pages. The second part that could be separate or included with the primary part would be R multiple dwelling, 120-9 RMD, but also minimum area and dimensions of lots, because we get into what's actually allowed in RMD. And this is only about 3 pages, but and only about 1 page is modified and new. Third part that could be included with the primary part or separate is some of the more esoteric rules that we're proposing: garage sales, waste disposal, sanitary landfill dumping, and outside storage of materials and uses prohibited in all districts. I should mention that the code currently says all outside storage in any districts in the town is prohibited, except for construction materials that are there for a year for construction. So essentially outside storage is forbidden anywhere in town right now. We want to get away from that totally and focus on junk. Junk should be what's prohibited, not outside storage, okay? And that's why these are all tied together. So these are about 4 pages, but only about 2 pages that are modified and new. The fourth part that could be totally separate all falls under Chapter 100, subdivision of land. There are the definitions and word usage. There's a new 16.1 flag lots. And then there's changes to streams, drainage, retention basins, which includes the drainage district. And then there's one minor change that we do without in 118 neighborhood parks and playgrounds. But this is about 3 pages, about 2 pages new and modified. Now, what you'll see in our proposal coming up is that we are actually well into Chapter 100, subdivision of land. There are 2 major parts. One is the part of what are the requirements around subdivision of land in terms of what's an allowed use? The other one is what are the planning board processes for approval of subdivision of land applications? We are well into the planning board processes part. And it might make sense to do all the chapter 100 together. But anyway, I'll get to that in a minute. The fifth part that it could be totally separate is this appendix chapter A125 design criteria, which is all those street, road and pavement design things. There are actually a couple of detail updates, like for private road sections and driveway sections that should be updated, but frankly, it's difficult to do because it requires a town engineer and it gets expensive. And the sixth part is that RRC, totally new district, which is about 3 pages plus a map update. So that's the breakdown of what we have submitted in this package, but well, here's a better way of looking at it. So those are the definitions in red. It's already separate. And then the 6 parts I mentioned, they do indeed add up to a total of 33. But this is what we're going to suggest. That instead of what we submitted here as residential, do approvals in this series, 120-5 definitions, which has already been submitted to the town board. Number 2 would be the primary residential grouping, but including the next 2 small sections. So it gets all the residential parts. It's 22 total pages, 15 that are new and revised. So that's a big chunk. The next separate one, which you haven't gotten all of yet, is chapter 100, subdivision of land. So it would include what we've submitted in this submission, but also including planning board subdivision approval procedures now in progress. In total, that will be 29 pages, 12 of which are new and revised. Then there's that little one, appendix chapter A125, design criteria for streets and roads. Another one we are already through, but it's 12069 planning board procedures for site plan reviews and special permits that we have not yet submitted. We have agreed internally with the code committee, but have not turned those into you. That's 15 total pages, 7 new and revised. Then I'd come back with the RRC, residential commercial district, which is 3 pages. We know we're going to have some cleanup of changes, errors, and other small items that we have yet to be determined. For example, we have no code for electric vehicle charging. But if you add up all that we can see that we've essentially completed as a code committee, partly turned over, part we have not turned over, it all adds up to 90 pages, 40 of which are new and revised. So that comes to this question for this group. How aggressive does the town board want to be? How big is too big for a grouping of updates? The sequencing proposal at least keeps grouping within a single town code chapter. So we've got chapter 120, which is zoning, chapter 100, subdivision of land, and then chapter, I think it's A125, which is all the other stuff, the roads and stuff. Certainly the code committee would continue to assist with any preferred groupings. So if we're able to decide what groupings we want to proceed with, we would verify the latest update proposals in that grouping. We'd fix any omissions and changes to prior submissions, and we'd resubmit them to the town board in the preferred groupings and ordering. We just need to decide what that grouping and ordering will be. Superimposed on top of this, as Luther well knows, is the need to fit in 120-64.1 solar energy systems that is being worked on now by the solar advisory group with the help of the code committee. So whenever that's available, I would guess we would slip that in and make that a highest priority, just because there's new solar proposals coming along all the time. So I think this is it. What now? Comes back to, are you willing to tackle that big group with sometimes 25 to 29 pages in each group?
It is daunting. And first of all, thank you so much. It's
That's a lot of
an enormous effort.
Part of my reason for putting down 90 pages and 40 new is saying, look at all we've done. Yeah, really.
You're getting page
This
after
is,
page, yeah.
this is really unprecedented for the town board to take on anything like this in recent history. I've never seen anything like it.
So we gotta start somewhere,
Yeah,
but,
back
but
on
first
your-
of all, can we get a copy of this, this whole
and that has it,
presentation?
if,
Put it on the website.
it's,
Can
So
you
if you-
email it? This
Yeah, I can.
electronic,
so,
email it to you.
this is a PDF version. I don't give out PowerPoints because they're too easy to change. So
Okay.
this is a PDF.
but that's all right.
Same.
I would like it, because in my
Yeah,
head, I
Everything,
did,
it's exactly the same. It's just not changeable
okay,
as easily.
all right, but I could
Yep.
make comments
Yep.
and
Yep.
in my head, question things as we go.
Yep.
And to me, it's like I have more comments
So what I-
on certain things than other things.
it's
Want this copy?
No, I'd like electronic,
for the average person,
I have-
including
clean out my office.
including town board members. You could go through everything I've presented here and say, oh, this doesn't sound right, or I'm concerned about this.
Yeah,
Logically, then you say, what does the proposal really say? You try to match this to the document of the proposed handout or the
Mhm.
proposal and see what does it really say. But that step is tough. Because I tried to refer to the sections to help you
Yeah.
refer back. And that handout is in chronological order, so the 60
This-
comes
this
before
thing?
61, comes before 62.
wait, what is in which, this,
You're right, the
Okay.
submission is in chronological
Yeah.
order. If you look at it, all the sections are in chronological order.
Okay.
So if I correctly stated the section in this presentation, you can somewhat easily get there.
okay,
But it's a lot. There's no way of making the town code simple.
Does it make sense to start with the definitions?
And so. Do you wanna, I mean, the definitions, I looked over them, they seemed pretty straightforward. Is this something we're gonna do like right now?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I mean, not this evening, but
yeah, but I think that we could do more than just the definitions.
yeah,
at the
as
next
that
one.
one page, I think 2 pages back would be.
Well, the definitions are in chapter 120, so you could add definitions to the big part of 120 if you wanted to. Then it gets to be instead of 25, 31 pages, but yeah, definitions don't add a lot of difficulty.
Back to slides where you have the list of them.
Yeah.
There. you go.
So these are the ones that we've already given in our submission to the town board.
Ones where like it would read as the code, and you have the red included.
Yeah, so what, so
Like we saw when the commercial was included.
yeah, they're in our, what we handed out is all color coded by what's changed and what's different. And black, of course, is what's already there. So I think what we're talking about on the table here is definitions in 1, 2, and 3 are all in section 1, it's all in the zoning code, chapter 120. And if you're willing to take those all on together, more power to you.
Yeah, that seems a bit much.
I was thinking, I mean, the definitions seem pretty straightforward, but
Well, okay, so you could. Let's see. You could do definitions with the primary part, right? So.
Yeah.
Right, so you could do definitions with this.
well, there's a lot of stuff in there,
A lot of stuff.
and I know I'm gonna have comments on a lot of it, I'll tell you right now. I
That
got
was,
it, and I don't think you wanna hear them
I-
now, but.
well, Well, I didn't think this would be the only discussion. Yeah, I'm not in a position to say take it or leave it. That's why we presented to you.
I don't know, I think, overall, they've done a heck of a job here and
Well, I would like people to have this sink in.
Yeah.
These things and these potential, recommendations. And, I'd like everybody to let that settle in their heads, but to come back. In fairly soon, we set a date. And with your comments, like. On how, at least for a couple of things.
Mhm, Sure.
So that we
well,
can hash it
okay,
out, like it, don't like it.
One,
and-
one, you'd have to decide. So maybe you could shorten things a bit if you'd want to write down your comments or your concerns and submit them to the code committee, by email ahead of time. However, that process doesn't allow the interchange among people at the same time.
Yeah.
So that has its disadvantages.
But I mean, I
Okay.
think I'm on the board.
I'm not, well, I guess because you're not a official, I was just not sure of the legality of doing some of that.
Yeah, would we,
I think you would want to have those discussions in a public meeting instead of just emails.
At another workshop.
Okay,
kinda-
Yes. So,
Where we could talk about things where
Right.
we as a board, like, you okay, move on, not what are you thinking
Right.
about this and why?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then before we send it back, like you know what I mean? We don't need to involve. I think we could start with us, like, okay, what do we need? What do we
Right.
want to get back from the code committee?
I'm just trying to pick out going through here, what would be a good point? How much is too much? So do we want to go through up to home occupations? Or do we want to go further than that?
I would think we were looking at 15 pages here with definitions. And I don't think we have, the code committee's done a heck of a job here. And while we all have a little bit of opinion on, maybe they like this and don't like that, I think in general, we're probably pretty much all on the same page. We're looking at things that need to be updated and changed around. So I would think that we could probably tackle the 15 pages, we read up on it, we set up a meeting, a workshop again, and we got time to, instead of watching a TV program, you go through it and pick out the highlights or use a highlighter and we come back to the next meeting there. But I'm guessing that knowing some of my other board members, we're probably all of us aren't that far out of touch with this thing here. I don't think it'll be that. There's work to be done, but I don't think it's impossible by any means. That's my opinion.
but you're talking about the 15 pages of definitions?
I think, is it the one I have up on the screen now? It's what I call the primary with mostly inseparable parts. So it's R20, R30, plus the 120, 20 accessory buildings, 60 home occupations, 60.2 sale produce, 61.1 two-family dwellings, bed and breakfast, short-term rentals, and private airstrips. And the reason I said they're mostly inseparable is that if you look at what's permitted in 120-7 and 120-8, it refers to all of those things. So you really shouldn't get to the point where you're approving a home occupation, for example, and don't tell anybody what a home occupation is or what the requirements are. So if you approve 120-7 and 120-8 as we propose, then you really need to approve these at the same time.
So if I'm
It's
looking
like
at this,
25.
that's what
just
I
call
was
it.
thinking.
I'm sorry?
It'd be like 25 pages.
Yeah. it would go-
Including the definitions,
If we did
Yeah.
everything up there,
plus the definition.
plus the definitions, it's like 25 pages.
Okay,
And it leaves us off at 120-62.
We want to go over that for first Monday in May?
okay. So in terms of referring it to, let's be specific on this handout.
Yep.
Where are we going from
Up
where to where?
from
The
the very
page
beginning.
25 to
I'm sorry,
120-62.
which is page
Page 25.
25. Piece of cake. huh?
Yeah, we actually have page numbers on.
Yeah,
Right there,
right. Okay, so we're gonna do that first.
Yes.
everything above that,
Everything above that,
including definitions.
yeah, including definitions, and come back with your thoughts, your initial impression and thoughts about,
Like Luther said, break out the highlighter.
yeah,
Start
and
marking
make
it.
your notes.
Yep.
And then we talk about it each section.
So did you say it's page 25 or including page 25?
Yeah, including
Part of-
page 25.
About half of
up
page
to-
25.
Up until 120-62 comes
Right.
in at the bottom third of that page.
For you to have it.
Okay,
marked
so
up
you're gonna
there.
include 12062?
Yeah.
No,
We're gonna stop.
no,
above
we'll
that.
stop right
Stop at
before that.
62. Going back for, first Monday in May 5th.
Scott, just to be clear, everything in red is new.
Yeah.
Is new. And if it's red and crossed out, it's existing but deleted. The proposal is to delete it.
And you said the green is just,
The green is
That's
just my comments
A
and
comment, okay.
yeah, our members have said when we post, if we post this on the web, we'd rather not include the green, just delete it so it doesn't confuse people. I personally like the green because it helps me keep track of where it came from. If I need to refer back to the source, I can. Or it may add some credibility to say 5 other towns have the same wording or something like that. But it generally will just confuse people. The green will.
But I know why you do it, and I find that helpful, as
Okay.
a little side comment.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what they
I
are.
find it
side
very
comment.
helpful.
Well, we can leave them in.
Well, for now,
Okay. Oh, yeah, you've got them for sure.
this is for discussion, so we
Yep,
can
yep.
wrap our heads around it and.
but when we post it, I think what Scott was saying, when we post it on the town website,
Yeah.
they might want those removed. If it will confuse residents, they have some of the other members on the committee were thinking that it may confuse.
So do we
confuse-
post this whole thing or not without the
We
green?
don't have a policy. So my
Because this is
request,
just a working
my
thing.
request to the
It's not,
supervisor.
we haven't, I'm sorry.
My request to the supervisor and the supervisor secretary was that the code committee work with whoever's posting those to come up with the versions that are posted. For example, then we could create the version without the green for posting on the website.
I got
Want
it.
this posted until
If-
the green is gone?
Do you want public opinion on that?
Go ahead.
Janet, I like the idea of the green, because that gives us an idea of the thought process
Mhm.
behind it.
Now it's coming out of some,
Yeah, especially
Give-
5 other towns.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. I think it gives a good perspective to people that you're just not willy-nilly doing things, that you've done your research.
I got a question. If we're going up halfway through page 25, should we just go to page 27 and get that next section done? 160-62? Or does that kind of not fit your schedule, Scott?
No, it's totally up to you.
Because
We
it's
can
not
work
that,
with anything.
it's a
Yeah,
another
it-
page and a half.
Yeah.
And then we're done with that.
I'm fine with it.
So,
Yeah, I feel like if I read 27 pages
So
of
you-
code, I might as well read one more.
so you are including 129 and 12017,
Oh,
right?
Okay,
All right, so you are including what I called the second part, if it's in chronological order. Yeah, 129 and 127.
And if we're just highlighting it for discussion, what's the difference?
Yeah, so if you go all the way to 62.
Yeah.
If you go all the way to 62. At
So
120-62,
in-
then you've covered the whole. Zoning code, 120. If you're willing to do that. That really. would-
well, our discussions may not let us get through everything,
True.
but
Yeah.
we could give it a shot.
we could, yeah.
So that essentially is what I showed in our proposal. 120-5, the definitions, and then the second one would be primary residential grouping plus garage sales, plus wage storage, plus RMD, and it's all in chapter 120. You've got the whole chapter 120. All the zoning code. That would be all we could ask for the next step.
So we'll shoot for that for the 5th.
Should we start at 6 o'clock?
Yes.
Okay, wait, let me get my, what are we talking about here?
Or is that gonna?
What I have not heard anybody say, at least yet, is, well, we really don't want to talk about that topic. I haven't heard anybody sense that.
We have, all needs to be discussed.
These are all needs,
Yeah.
based on experience.
I think starting at 6 is fine, but like Gene said, we can go, we're gonna review all this. There's a
Yeah.
very good chance we're not gonna get through it all.
Right.
Yeah,
at
and
that
then
meeting.
We may get,
But
as
it's-
we
yeah.
get people's ideas and thoughts,
Yeah.
realizing we need to go a little deeper dive into
Yeah.
something.
So,
So that's Cinco de Mayo.
Tequila.
We got it. Yeah,
So May 5th,
tequila,
then?
you know, some.
we have to, I
We
think.
got Corona with
Discussion
lime.
started at 6.
All right, wait.
Do we want to make a decision? We want to start at 6 in May, or do we want to stick to 7?
I'm fine, I can go.
7,
7.
7. We worked at 5:30 here, so I'm scrambling to get back here if you're gonna do it at 6.
Okay.
Okay. Great, we don't need to decide the next step after that. If we get through chapter 100 zoning and decide which one we do next at that time.
Page 27, right?
I presume the code committee will knock off for the summer, but we'll still be available if you people keep working through it.
I think we've got enough to keep us busy for a while.
I think we've got enough lined up that you don't need us working all summer.
I agree. All right, is that a wrap?
So that'll do it for tonight.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
Good job.
Full committee, thank you.
I will do
Make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You.
Words of review close to page 27.
Oh, thank you.
The work that your committee puts into
Yeah.
it, and then you assign.
Janice, she adjusted withholdings on these.